Well, more protests are expected today in Egypt after a speech from President Mohamed Morsi last night meant to calm tensions. Mr. Morsi refused to give up any of his recent self-appointed powers or to reschedule a referendum on the country's controversial new draft constitution. And that only made protesters more angry. They're calling for mass protests today, saying the government has lost its legitimacy.
Morsi supporters and opponents clashed near the presidential palace from Wednesday through Thursday, forcing the military to intervene. The battles left 6 people dead and more than 700 injured. The violence erupted after Morsi gave himself enhanced presidential powers. He also halted discussions on a new draft constitution, drawing more public anger. The military temporarily cordoned off the area around the presidential palace, deploying tanks and armored vehicles. The number of protesters continued to increase on Thursday night. One protester said the latest clashes have led her to demand Morsi's resignation instead of changes to the draft constitution.
With the additional protection of tanks, Mr. Morsi is safe behind the walls and barbed wire of the presidential palace. But the headquarters of his political party, the Muslim Brotherhood, was breached by a crowd who managed to start a fire. In his TV address, the president refused to cancel the planned referendum on the draft constitution, which is scheduled for later this month, and blamed some of the street violence on people in the pay of foreign powers. But he also said his immunity from any legal challenge to his decisions was only temporary. Mr. Morsi wants talks with the opposition on Saturday, a move welcomed by the US President Barack Obama, who telephoned his Egyptian counterpart to express concern about the unrest. Yet the opposition say they won't sit down to negotiate until the president immediately abandons both his new powers and the constitutional referendum.
I call for a full, productive dialogue with all figures and heads of parties, revolutionary youth and senior legal figures to meet this Saturday at the presidential palace in order to reach an agreement that unites the nation, with which we can all exit the constraints of division and conflict. I've announced in the past, and I repeat it today, the constitutional decree isn't meant to, and could never be meant to, prevent the judiciary from practicing its rights or preventing citizens from objecting to decisions or laws if there's reason for objection. The whole country should prepare for the referendum to take place on schedule, and if the country agrees to it, so begins the building of Egypt on its basis. And if the people reject the draft constitution, then I'll use my power and my responsibility for the composition of a new constituent assembly, whether by agreement or through a free election.
But the opposition appears divided over whether to sit down with President Morsi for a national dialogue. Mohamed al-Baradei, one of Egypt's major opposition figures, says Morsi's speech did not address their core concerns.
جبهة الإنقاذ الوطني تقدر ما تمر به البلاد من مصاعب.
We had hoped the president would answer the continuing calls to rescind the constitutional decree and delay the referendum until there's a national consensus on the constitution. We had wanted the president to have a comprehensive dialogue to save the country from the split that threatens it.